Welcome, everybody. My name is Shiri Fein-Grossman. I'm the CEO of the Israel-Africa Relations Institute. We're an Israeli think tank, a platform that was established 2 years ago by Chaim Taib, who's a philanthropist and businessman in Africa who cares passionately about Israel-Africa relations. We publish research, policy briefings, recommendations, do events. We're focused on multi-sector, multi-field, disciplinary, from geopolitics to economy and business. We are very passionate about promoting Israel-Africa relations, and whoever here is here for the first time, welcome, and I hope you will continue to follow us in different events. This is another event that we're doing in a series that we started back in December. We had an event, a webinar on Nigeria. Then in the beginning of January, we did a Hebrew seminar on Somaliland, and now we're doing it in English with very distinguished guests and participants. Just to share and heads up, we have another webinar planned for February 26th that will deal with the economic reforms in Ethiopia. We will have the former central bank governor, Mr. Mamo Mihireto, who was also the CEO of the Ethiopian Sovereign Wealth Fund. So you're welcome to join us in our next webinar. For our topic today, we will discuss Somaliland statehood. I'm very much aware of the controversy and engagement and dialogue this recognition from Israel has created, and I assume that we have also many Somalis on the webinar with us, and we welcome engagement with everybody, and you're most welcomed. And I just ask that we be respectful of the webinar, and so we can hear. Happy to hear a discourse and do a dialogue all together. So, without further ado, I will give the floor to Bashir Goth. Bashir is Somaliland's representative to the the United States. He sits in Washington. Bashir, please, the floor is yours. No, you're just on mute still, Bashir? Can you just unmute yourself, please? Bashir, we can't hear you. Bashir?
Yeah, you hear me now?
Now we hear you. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, technical problems, as you said. Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Shiri. Thank you for hosting me and for hosting everybody else. And thank you for working tremendously, on this organizing and putting together this event, this webinar. I know it takes a lot of time and energy, and thank you very much for that. It's also my pleasure to share this platform with distinguished speakers from many places. And let me mention somebody I know, and that's Greg Mills, who has been following Somaliland for a very long time, both as a scholar and as an election observer. And actually, he has led several election observers to Somaliland, and he is a man who knows a lot about Somaliland. And I welcome him. I'm glad to share this platform with him. Let me also welcome all the audience that are joining us today from all over the world, particularly from Somaliland, from Israel, from the USA, from South Africa, and from the rest of the region. So let me start from the latest, as you said, controversy. You started, it created a lot of controversy, okay? So let me start with that controversy and start from the latest development and then walk backwards to the history and the background of Somaliland. When Israel recognized Somaliland on 26 December 2025, uh, it created what some people actually describe it as geopolitical earthquake. Speculations came pouring in from different parts of the world. Reactions were different. Some of them, they put out their conspiracy theories about the objectives of Israel. What Israel wants in the Horn of Africa? What do they want in Somaliland? To the point that some, analysts in the Middle East branded it as a second Sykes-Picot agreement in the Middle East, up to that level. Condemnations were swift from regional organizations like the African Union, the Arab League, the EU, everywhere. But there was another earthquake that was, barely registered, or many people did not notice, and that was the earthquake that came from Somaliland itself. The reaction of the Somaliland people and the jubilation and the celebrations and the emotional outpouring of the Somaliland people on hearing the recognition of their country by the state of Israel. And that shows something that should have been actually registered. Somaliland, which is a predominantly Muslim country, whose perception, the people's perception, has been framed by the Israeli-Arab conflict for decades and decades, like any other Muslim countries, and all of a sudden, this tectonic change of mind and heart happening, and that Muslim country embraced the Israeli flag and came out to the streets wearing, Somaliland women wearing the Israeli flag as hijab. And people should have asked it, you know what? Maybe Israel has touched a nerve here. This was something that the international community did not notice. And actually, it was like that. That tectonic, earthquake that happened in Somaliland was a reflection of the injustice, international injustice and hypocrisy that Somaliland faced for over the last 35 years. And why I say that? Let's look at history. On the same year, 1991, when Somaliland restored, not Somaliland is not a secessionist as the media cliche always say. It's not a breakaway. It's not a secessionist. It's not a separatist. It was an entity that existed before independence and after independence, and then joined a failed union, and then restored and reclaimed its sovereignty one more time. So in 1991, when Somaliland restored its or reinstated its independence again and sovereignty, there was the collapse of the Soviet Union. And out of the ashes of the Soviet Union, 14 Republican countries emerged, or 14 Republican states emerged. Some of them, the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, but some of the republics, like almost 7 republics, declared unilateral restoration of their independence in 1990, 1 year before the collapse of the Soviet Union. Later, in Yugoslavia is split into 7 countries. Czechoslovakia is split into two states. Down the road, and in Africa, for example, Eritrea became independent the same year, 1991, when Somaliland restored its independence. A decade later, South Sudan became independent. And in Asia, Timor-Leste, or Eastern Timor, became independent. All these countries, this is where I'm coming to the hypocrisy and injustice of the world. All these countries, the international community did not invoke what they call rules-based order or international law. They did not invoke violation of integrity and territorial integrity and sovereignty of other countries, like the Soviet Union, for example, or like Yugoslavia, or like Czechoslovakia, or like Ethiopia, for example, or Sudan. Nobody invoked that, okay? But then when it comes to Somaliland, it is international law comes into place. The violation of sovereignty and territorial integrity comes to place. And just like the Soviet Union republics, Somaliland was an independent entity, was a separate entity that was colonized separately by the British until it got its independence on 26 June 1960. The other side of Somalia, we call now Federal Republic of Somalia, was an Italian colony, two different entities, two different colonial systems, and then two independence days. Somaliland became independent on 26 June 1960, 5 days before the other side. And then the Italian Somalia became independent on 1st July 1960. The day when we became independent, 34 countries recognized Somaliland. We have still, and you can find it, the congratulatory cables that came from many states of the world, the United States, including China, and the proclamation of independence by the Queen of England that time. That's what Somaliland was. And then 5 days later, we joined a failed union. And that union was problematic from the beginning and was not actually based on reality, because the dream of the Somali-speaking people in the Horn of Africa, which was in 5 parts of the Horn of Africa, like Djibouti, which was called that time the French Somali coast, and then the Somali region in Ethiopia, which is mistakenly called most of the time as Ogaden, and the Somali region in Kenya, which was called the Northern Frontier District, and the Italian Somalia and Somaliland Protectorate. All the dream of the Somali people was that to bring all these people in under one flag and one state called Greater Somalia. That was the dream. That dream was unrealistic. Somali people were not aware, were not educated enough that time that Africa itself was all like that. Like if you look at the Swahili speaking people in Africa, there are 150 million. There are over 17 countries in Africa. The Hausa speaking people are like that. The Fulani speaking people are like that. The Berber people in North Africa are like that. So it was unrealistic to think about uniting people by the basis of language. And then when the union happened, it was immediately problematic. Two different systems, two different cultures. It was never ratified legally, and it just dragged it on for a few years until the military took power, and then it was a military dictatorship of a Soviet satellite regime that was very oppressive, and particularly for the Somaliland people. And at the end of the day, Somaliland people have to take arms against the regime, and there was a devastating civil war that resulted genocide, one of the biggest genocides that time in the Horn of Africa, actually, and maybe in East Africa or maybe the whole African continent. Uh, at that time, unfortunately, we didn't have internet. If we had internet, the situation would have been different today. And then in 1991, the central government collapsed. The Somaliland people came together and they said, no more union. And they restored their independence. 1991, same time as the Soviet republics, same time as for example Eritrea and many other places. But then the international community always, when it comes to Somaliland, says invokes international law, invokes violence against sovereignty and territorial integrity of a fictional state that only exists by international law by name, that only exists in international law by name only. And the reality is there. So when Israel recognized Somaliland, it recognized a reality on the ground. It recognized an existing state that has actually fulfilled all the conditions of statehood according to the Montevideo Convention, and a country also that does not violate the Charter of the African Union. And here I will read what the Charter of the African Union says, that was passed in 1964 by the Organization of African Unity. It says the AU declared that all member states pledge themselves to respect the borders existing in their achievement of national independence. Look at that, on their achievement of national independence. In other words, to the principle of inviolability of colonially inherited territorial integrity. That is what the charter says. Somaliland abides by that charter fully. It's the independence border, it's the colonial border, it's a border that has international agreements with it, Anglo-Italian agreement, and Anglo-Ethiopian, Anglo-Italian, many other agreements have been signed, and they are all available. So Somaliland, 35 years has established a fully functioning government, a role for actually democracy in Africa. And I think and a scholar like Greg Mills will testify to that. And he testified many times in his reports, in the report issued by his by election observers. Multiple one-person, one-vote elections, 6 peaceful transfer of power in a very, very tough neighborhood. We prevented terrorism and piracy from our strategic position where we are located in the Gulf of Aden, where 30% of international trade passes through, and have been facing problems recently. And that's the world, when the world woke up to the actually strategic importance of Somaliland and its coast. And then 35 years of peace and stability, and that role model we are, the international community have just given us a blind eye and look at the other side. Instead of recognizing us, they just condemned us, isolated us. And let me give you one of the injustices that happened to us. When COVID happened, during the COVID time, Somaliland could not get COVID vaccine from all over the world, from from the United Nations, from independent nations. We applied and appealed to everywhere, and no country actually gave us vaccine. And the simple reason was you are not a recognized country, you are not a member of the United Nations, so we don't know how to give you vaccine. It was our people, and particularly the Somalilander American doctors here in the United States who actually took the first oxygen concentrators and oxygen cylinders to Somalia. Later on, some vaccines came from friendly countries like Taiwan and the United Arab Emirates, and some came from the United States and a little from WHO. So that is the kind of injustice that Somaliland people facing. Now, when we got the Harry Truman movement, what the Israel actually is a Harry Truman movement, is when Harry Truman recognized the state of Israel, the movement that it was declared on 14 May 1948. Now we have our Harry Truman movement. And we, Somaliland, this is an achievement that we have been struggling for 35 years. We say thank you to Israel, and Israel is really our friend, and we will not accept hypocrisy. Like today, I was reading the Turkish president president and in Saudi Arabia, meeting the Saudi crown prince, and in the statement they issued after the meeting, they condemned and they rejected the recognition of Israel of Somaliland. You know what? Look at that hypocrisy. Turkey occupies southern Cyprus, and you are talking from the other side of Cyprus today, Shiri. You talk to us. I mean, they deny the self-determination of the Kurdish people. Why do they care about what Somaliland, and if Somaliland is recognized? Because they have actually an internal domestic problem, and they want to portray that on other parts of the world. It's a kind of a distraction, and turning the eyes of the international community on other issues. I think with that, I will leave the floor to other speakers and the audience. Thank you very much, Shay.
Thank you, Bashir. That's wonderful. Thank you. Now I just want to recognize there's a lot of Somalilanders here that I think they're proud of their nation, and rightly so. And I'm very happy we got this opportunity to give you the floor to explain the Somaliland's case. Our next speaker is Professor Sheldon Geller, who is a political analyst and Africanist scholar who has worked in dozen African countries as an international development consultant with USA, the UNDP, Club du Sahel, and other donors. Over the past 40 years, he is the author of several books on Africa and has written extensively on religion, politics development, and natural resources management and environmental issues. He has taught at Indiana University, Michigan State University. Hebrew University of Jerusalem and Tel Aviv University, and has been a research associate at Indiana University's workshop in political theory and policy analysis, Princeton University, and the Truman Institute in Jerusalem. I just want to say there's a lot of people raising their hands, and I'm sure there's a lot of questions. We will leave time for questions at the end of the webinar. We have Professor Sheldon after, and that is going to present a comparative analysis between Somalia and Somaliland, both from an economic and political perspective. Then we will have Greg Mills talk about the implication of the recognition from a Pan-African point of view, and our own senior research fellow, Dr. Asher Lubotsky, will be the last speaker with the reasoning for Israel's recognition and kind of the implication and fallout we see after. So please be patient and write your questions down, and we'll get them in the end. And now I move the floor to you, please, Professor. Just unmute yourself. Go. Great, fantastic, thank you. No, you double clicked. Just another click on the unmute button, please. Here we go.
Start out by asking, why is Somali and Somaliland so different from each other, even though they have similar languages, religion, physical environment, economic low levels of development, but yet they follow two different paths. And one just goes back slightly to understand this, to go back to the 19th century. In 1879, they had the opening of the Suez Canal, and the British wanted to make sure that they would have a clear route to their colonies in India, to their empire in India. And they said, oh, Berbera is the great choice. So let's go into Somaliland. And this is how they got to Somaliland. And the Italians at that time, they said, we're getting to be a big power. Why can't we have a piece of Africa? And they found out, okay, we'll try and go into what's now Somalia. And they did. But and until the second half of the 19th century, it's very difficult for Europeans to conquer people. After that, they had the weaponry and the technology to conquer. So these are the reasons why Somali became Italian and Somaliland became under British rule. So I don't want to give the whole history, but you know the story. At the end of 1960, Somaliland and Somalia received their independence, and then they joined together. And then they tried to live together, but they had different problems that made it impossible, because you had inter-clan fighting. And then in 1969, Siad Barre took over and created a Soviet horrible dictator, which started to really attack the Izhak clans and was launching basically genocide against them. And he lasted until 1991, when the Soviet Union stopped financing the Somali military dictatorship and turned against him, supported Ethiopia. And that's when Somaliland became independent, and that's when we had the two differences. Now, Somalia, as soon as they became independent, they started to say, why did they become independent? Because they had suffered most of the casualties, and why would they want to live in a country where you had other clans were trying to repress them and supported their repression? So they wanted to leave, just the way the people in Darfur wanted to have more freedom when they were under Sudan. And they started out, one of the advantages they had, that was 80% of the population came from one particular clan. So that was helpful. Whereas in Somali, you had several clans all competing for power and fighting with each other. And they never got together to decide on what kind of constitutional arrangement. And so what I'm be talking about from the rest of the time is the constitutional evolution, the protection and security of their populations, and the level of economic and political independence. Three things, and why they were so different. Well, from the very start, the clans got together and decided to make a transition to more democratic regime, but in respecting traditional authority and the great role of the elders. And I'm an elder, so I appreciate that. And I've worked all over Africa, and the importance of the elders is very much underestimated in their continued influence, especially in the poor rural areas which have been neglected by centralized African states. So gradually they established a one man, one person vote for presidency. They established two houses of parliament, and the elders were given the role of being the peacemakers and resolving conflicts. They created a judiciary which respected Islamic laws, and they continued to move forward until 2001, and they created a constitution. Now, meanwhile, back in Somalia, from 1991 till 2000, they were fighting with each other, and there was no beside the inter-clan fighting, the political system they set up was dominated totally by the clans and by the representatives of elders in the clan. So the president at one point was elected by 175 people in parliament. It was the parliament that elected the president, not the people, which is the case in Somaliland. So this is a second reason, and a third reason is that in the future, one of the things that is the responsibility of governments is to protect the security of their populations, and Somaliland government was not able to do it. Not only were they unable to stop the inter-clan fighting, but they were unable to stop the advance of al-Shabaab. So rather than a country which was protecting, a country which was secure, which had political stability, they had constant political stability. They never evolved viable political institutions that involved the participation of the people. So they expanded the electorate at one time to 14,000 delegates to the parliament, which then would elect the president. So this is still another reason. And when we talk about security, as a representative to the United States, Mr. Barth said, they did nothing. They weren't able to stop al-Shabaab. They didn't protect the security. And today, more than 30% of the country is controlled by al-Shabaab. There is no security. They're totally dependent on external forces like the African Union, which eats up an enormous amount of the budget, energy, funds going into Somalia. For example, the 25-26 budget for the African Union forces in Somaliland is $536 million, which is the equivalent of the total budget of Somaliland. Somaliland's armed forces is only 8,000 to 12,500, and it's totally financed by the people. It represents the people, and Somaliland doesn't have to worry about people taking over all their fishing land. The fishermen can still fish, and they don't have to be worried by being invaded by al-Shabaab. So this is the security, and right now in 2024, Somalia had 4 million displaced persons. So why would the people of Somaliland want to stay in a regime which couldn't protect its own people, which had created so many million displaced persons? So that's still a third reason why Somaliland seems to be doing relatively better. Fourth reason is the level of third. Another reason is the level of political and economic independence. The national budget of Somaliland, only 16% of it comes from donors. The national budget of Somalia, 67% comes from foreign donors. So Somalia has not been able to generate resources either by taxing their people or by developing the country. So this is another example, and they're totally dependent on external forces, which is a hodgepodge because you have the Americans training in there, you have the Egyptians, and you also have the Turks, three different people, and the Turks are training the army in Turkish. I believe they just named the head of the Somalian army a Turkish, somebody who was educated in Turkey. So what kind of independence do they have? This is why external forces can have so much influence in Turkey, because they don't have the resources and they don't have the good governance structures that one needs. Whereas in Somaliland, they have instituted a economic regime where they're targeting specific problems to solve these problems. For example, there's a problem, their main export, and this is true of Somaliland, is to the Gulf states of livestock, goats and sheep. And what their people in the Gulf states are complaining, the quality is not good. So Somalia has a program to raise the quality of the livestock. They have programs, they know that energy is a problem. They have programs to produce more solar energy. And of course, the United Arab Emirates invested in Berbera, which can probably once again, like it was in the 19th century, be the main port for that region and a crucial port. That's why everybody is fighting over Somalia and Somaliland, because they want access to that Red Sea and the Sea of Aden so that they can have reduced prices. So these are several reasons why I think that we should consider not just the UN, which is supporting basically a failed state, uh, and the Somalia case reveals the weaknesses of institutions inherited from colonial rule in promoting democracy and political stability, the poor design and failure of institutional policies, because why, with all this foreign aid, we're seeing the expansion of jihadist movements all over Africa, and to promote equitable development. Why are we seeing such larger and larger percentages of population becoming more poor? Whereas Somaliland seems to be a very good model for Africa. Why? Because it integrates modern democratic values and institutions with customary authority to build an effective hybrid system based on local knowledge, priorities, and realities, and effective policies to build on the development potential and resources of its people. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Dr. Greg Mills, is a visiting fellow at the University of Navarra in Spain, a senior associate fellow and advisory board member of the Royal United Service Institute, and the strategic advisor to several African leaders. Previously, from 2005, he was he was for 20 years the founding director of the Johannesburg-based Burhurst Foundation. Greg, I hope I pronounced everything right. Please, Dr. Mills, you got the floor.
Thanks very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfectly.
Good. Thank you for the opportunity to chat to you. I'm speaking to you from Navarra in Spain. So it's slightly unusual to be talking about Somaliland from a cold climate such as this. But let me firstly just welcome old friends. Nice to see Bashir, among others, Ahmed Osman, the people that I've got to know over the course of my 23 years of engagement with the issue of Somaliland. I first visited there back in 2003 in trying to understand how a country had built itself from the inside out as opposed from the outside in. And I'll come back to that reference in a brief moment. And I've learned a great deal over my subsequent dozen or so trips, which, as Bashir reminded, has taken in also running two election observation missions during the nine competitive elections that Somaliland has had, which is an extraordinary record, particularly for a country that is very poor, because we so often get this narrative tossed at us that you have to be rich to be able to have democracy. You have to get over your development challenges, and then you can slide from authoritarian systems of government, as in the East Asian model, to more democratic systems of government. But in fact, the African record is very clear. The better the democracy, the better the overall development outcome. There's a clear empirical line between wealth and democratic conditions, and as well as volatility. And that goes to the reason why people are prone to invest in things other than national resources in countries that are democracies, because they have greater legal protections in the process. But that's not the main points I want to make today. I want to make three kind of analytical points and then turn to four more general points in the 7 or so minutes that I have been allocated, which remain. I think the first analytical point I would make is that this is not a new border. The question of Somaliland's recognition opening up a Pandora's box of irredentist and other claims in Africa is one that's a red herring. It is not a new border. The Cairo Declaration may have spoken about the inviolability of African borders. In fact, this was, as has been pointed out, a pre-existing border. And this move and Somaliland's history over the past 35 years is about strengthening an existing border rather than creating one. The second broad analytical point I would make is that it turns the focus of African state capacity, governance, and indeed state creation on its head, does Somaliland, because traditionally African states were largely created by external intervention, who came in, of course, in a bloody and a terrible period of colonialism, and carved up the continent based on external preferences, desires, and wants, normally of leadership. So African borders, as we know them today, are these rather arbitrarily drawn lines, the outcome of a great deal between colonial powers, not resembling, for the most part, where population groups lived, or for that matter, topography or the movements of peoples. But that means that when African countries or African governments took over from the colonial regimes, which occurred about 60 or 65 years ago on average, they essentially inherited borders that they did not have to extend their authority to. Those borders were guaranteed, not least by the 1964 Cairo Declaration. They were not a matter of debate. So you have, in the case of the most extreme examples, such as the Congo, a border which is protected in spite of the fact that you don't extend governance to the extremes of those borders through security and, of course, through taxation. So governance really became dependent on the inviolability of borders, not on the capacity of the government itself. And this is a contrarian experience to that of Somaliland, which has built the country, as I said right at the outset, from the inside out. It has built it based on a commonality, as the previous speaker pointed out, largely Isaac-based clan structures, albeit with many sub-clans and sub-sub-clans, and as is the want in Somalia. But it's built from the inside out. This is a process of state creation which was started by Somalilanders and reached the boundaries of Somaliland rather than from the outside in. And then I think, thirdly, the broad analytical point I would make, which I'll revert to right back at the end, is this question of aid. There has been an assumption, at least until Donald Trump took over in the United States, that what you needed to develop was ever larger amounts and volumes of aid. Now, Somalia receives about 10 times the volume of aid, about $2 billion annually, that Somaliland receives. And I think the point is moot as a consequence of the relative performance of the two territories in terms of governance, in terms of security, in terms of looking after their citizens. I think Somaliland calls into question the very premise of what it is that donors are trying to achieve in terms of aid flows and how best this might be directed. Because Somaliland has been successful, relatively speaking, both in terms of governance, but also in terms of human rights and respect for each other, relative to what has happened in Somalia, or indeed relative to many other countries in the region, which have received much greater volumes of foreign assistance. Aid is often much more about the donor and their interests than it is about the recipient and the effects on governance. And I think Somaliland proves that point. So to turn to my four very brief points about what now, what is the domestic agenda of the Somalis? This morning I was fortunate enough to speak to a very senior member of the Somaliland government, and he basically summarized their domestic agenda as being about investment. And of course, they have had a problem with investment because to de-risk investment in a country, in terms of insurance, banking regulations, and the like, which is not recognized, has been costly and difficult. So there's a lot of optimism that Israel's recognition may indeed help the de-risking process. The second priority is, of course, diplomacy. The question there is who's next? Now, the Ethiopians always said that they would never be the first, but that they would be the second country to recognize Somaliland. Well, we're waiting. It's been just over a month, waiting to see if the Ethiopians, in fact, going to stay true to that promise or whether it's a vain one. In a sense, Ethiopia has had Somaliland exactly where they would like it. Unrecognized, vulnerable, dependent on Ethiopia, in as much more so than Ethiopia was dependent on Berbera, albeit a very important trade route, but they've essentially played to that vulnerability. This changes that balance, and it's by no means certain that the Ethiopians would necessarily be happy with that outcome. Yes, of course, publicly they're going to be, but certainly it changes the balance. It also changes the relationship potentially internally between the Somali community and the Ethiopians themselves, which is complicated and probably too complex to go into. So the next question is this going to be the United States? Or is this going to be somewhere in North Africa, perhaps even Dubai itself, given its 50-year lease on Berbera? Or is it going to be Morocco? Of course, Morocco is slightly challenging because of the Sahrawi claim and probably not going to, not wishing to do so because it has domestic implications for itself. So the question there is who's next and what role of diplomacy? The second point I would make is that of regional and international reaction, which links to this. And this is also about strategic positioning, in as much as it is about diplomacy. Somaliland sits astride an enormously important geopolitical, geostrategic area on the Red Sea, beset currently by conflicts, is beset by piracy. It has a great deal of strategic leverage, both diplomatically and in security terms. And the question for the Somalilanders is, how do they leverage that? How do they also balance their relationships with some of their near neighbors, whether it be Yemen or or Djibouti or the Turks? They were mentioned earlier, who have a particular relationship with Mogadishu, indeed with the Ethiopians, and of course with the Somalis first and foremost. The Somalis have outright rejected, of course, Israel's recognition, and that is, of course, problematic for both parties. But the question is then, how does Somaliland take a next step to be able to consolidate and get some reward out of this recognition process? Because otherwise the government will be simply accused of doing something which has little meaning for Somalilanders themselves in terms of some developmental advantages or some security advantages. The next step in that regard would probably be the signature of the Abraham Accords, and then presumably a snowball effect in terms of international relations. The third and second last point, for those concerned about the time, is really one about Africa itself. How do the Africans respond to this? The AU, and my former colleague and good friend Patrick Mazimhaka was the first person as the deputy AU chair of the commission to lead a mission to Somaliland back in the early 2000s. The question is really, how does the AU respond to this? Does it continue to live in this kind of Alice in Wonderland world, or the AU in Wonderland world, thinking about Somaliland as a kind of renegade province of Somalia, when all the evidence of the last 35 years is quite contrarian? What does this say about democracy in Africa is another question. It's a question that's also important for Israel, because Israel, until now, in terms of its diplomacy, has been willing to make relations with anybody, really, that would, without being too callous about it, but anybody that would want to have relations with Israel has been willing to cut a deal with Jerusalem. So Israel has drifted into an undemocratic space at times, actually rather contradictory to its own positioning within a Middle Eastern context. Hence the close relations with countries such as Uganda, which has just held an election, only in name, but certainly not in the way in which it was conducted. Even with Tanzania, in which the president recently got 97% in election. And if I ever got 97% in an exam, my parents would have thought that I cheated, which was probably correct, as indeed is the case in Tanzania. And then, of course, with Rwanda as well, where there has been, no political competition. So this raises a big question about both Israel's positioning vis-a-vis African democracies and support for them, which Somaliland is on the other side of the equation. This country that's had all of these elections where you've had very tightly contested processes. As I've said, I've witnessed two firsthand in very rural areas, remarkable processes of where people really value their vote. And there's been these half a dozen transfers of power in the process. And then, so in summary, let me just say, what's going to be the advantages for Somaliland of this process once the celebrations have died down? How are they going to translate recognition into an advantage with security in managing their near abroad, particularly the relationship with Somalia, and with Djibouti, and with Turkey? How are they going to translate this into greater development before all of Somaliland's success It remains a very poor place, highly dependent on external remittance flows. It's a $650 per capita economy, roughly a third of the sub-Saharan African average. It's very poor. It needs growth. It needs development. And how is external recognition going to assist in this regard, particularly mindful of the fact that aid has been such a blunt instrument, as I say, much more about the donor than about the recipient in terms of its intended impacts. And then how is this going to translate into greater investment for the Somalilanders so that the government can go back to its people and say, look, we're on this route to independence or to recognition, not to independence. They've already got that. We're on this route to recognition, and this translates into greater prosperity and greater security for Somalilanders, and that requires both a narrative, which we largely have, but also requires a series of actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mills. I think all of you have raised wonderful points until now. Dr. Asher Lubotsky is next and is going to address some of the issues, and some of them we can address in the Q&A section. Will come right after. And of course, I can also summarize and give you a little bit from my experience in the last couple of months. So Dr. Asher Lubotsky is a senior research fellow at the Israel-Africa Relations Institute and an Israel Institute teaching fellow at the University of Houston. He writes about Israel-Africa relations, both past and present, and Israel's engagement with the southern frontier. His upcoming book, Shifting Solidarities, uncovers the surprising early connections between Israel and the South African anti-apartheid movement, and it will be published in June 2026 by the University of Virginia Press. He holds a PhD in history from Indiana University and a master's degree from Bar-Ilan University. Asher, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for being here. It has been fascinating so far. I want to say one thing before I start, is that one of the things that I'm most proud of in my career is that I have been, I think, one of the earliest advocates for a relationship and a strong alliance between Israel and Somaliland. So it's wonderful to see it's actually happening. Especially since the end of December. So this is really feeling very good and a lot of pride here.
And Asi, I just want to let people know that back in April, we co-wrote this policy paper that recommends Israel to consider recognition. We said it in a little bit differently than what happened actually happened. But we are also very proud to be the first one to say this in public. So thank you, Asi, for that.
Thank you. Yes, definitely. This is something that the Institute is very proud of. All right. So first, I'm covering the Israeli perspective here, right? This was a bold move of Israel. It's actually historically not very typical of Israel to take such bold moves, to be the first state to recognize another state. Israel has been trying to be pretty cautious about those things usually. And the question that we ask ourselves is why? Why now? Why Somaliland? And before I get into more specific reasons, I want you to really understand, especially people who are not from Israel, that Israel post-October 7, 2023 is a different Israel. It's a different Israel. It's an Israel that is willing to take risks. It is an Israel that is very, very appreciative of its real allies. And it's an Israel that is it's noticing what countries and what societies are willing to stand by it, as opposed to countries who left it behind after October 7. So this is something that Israel is really noticing. And it's a new Israel in a way. Internationally speaking, it's a new Israel, and it's a much bolder Israel that is willing to take risks. So this is one thing. Other things that more specific reasons of why Israel wanted to do this move were, first of all, the issue of Red Sea security. Here, and it's very important to stress, Israel and Somaliland share enemies. The enemies of Somaliland are mostly the enemies of Israel, or some of them at least, many of them. The enemies of Israel are almost mostly also the enemies of Somaliland. So Israel and Somaliland share enemies here, and the Red Sea has become a very important arena of threats for Israel, of operations, and Israel understands that it needs to be much more active and much more present in this arena in order to tackle those enemies, and if they can do it together with another ally in Somaliland. Both Israel and Somaliland, right, don't have too many allies in the world. We all know that. It would be better. So we need to unite our forces and do it together, and we have a lot to do together here. So this is the first and foremost reasons for this collaboration and for this broad alliance between the countries and societies. The other thing is regional integration. In the end, Israel does want to be part of the region, broadly speaking, the Middle East, the Red Sea region. Israel is a nation of the Red Sea. It is a nation of the Middle East, and it is the only nation who actually borders Africa, right? An African country, which is with Sinai, with Egypt. So in a way, having an alliance with Somaliland is going with this logic of having more friends in the region. Not only in the West, not only in the United States, this is all important, but Israel wants to have allies in the region. The Abraham Accords, obviously, this is the main logic here, and Somaliland fits into it, of course, with some problems, with some backlashes from other countries in the region, unfortunately, but it's still, if we look at this really broadly, it's part of Israel moves to be more connected into this region. Another thing, and last thing that I would mention, because I also don't have too much time, is the idea of growth. Both the Israeli economy and the Somaliland's economy need each other. They need to have Somaliland needs new investments, for example. Israel needs new areas of collaboration too. And this is something that both countries can do mutually as a mutual assistance. When Israel started investing itself into Africa in the 60s, in the late 50s and 60s, what Israel told many African partners is that we are not here to be neo-colonial. We are not here to tell you what to do. We are here to do mutual assistance. We are going to help you if you need. You're going to help us. It's mutually beneficial for both of us. And we are equal. We are on equal footing. And this is something that we see is very important also with the relations with Somaliland. And there is an almost endless potential for those relations on the economic sphere. One more thing that I think many of us noticed is that the character, I'm not trying to romanticize it too much, but it seems that some parts of the national character of Israel and Somaliland is pretty similar. Like Somaliland, Israel knows what isolation means, right? Israel is kind of at least partially isolated among its neighbors. Somaliland is also isolated among some of its neighbors. International community, boycotts, stuff like this, as the ambassador here they mentioned before. This is something that Israel knows very well. And there is some kind of bond between nations like this and societies like this that want to come together and actually break this isolation that is unfair and hypocritic, as also His Excellency the Ambassador mentioned. So this is something that Israel and Somaliland, in terms of character, ethos, are sharing. Both Israel and Somaliland understand very well the hypocrisy of the international community in different ways, but it's something that is definitely shared between the nations. So, so when the international community, is condemning Israel for doing this, many Israelis say, "Okay, I mean, we don't really care anymore what you're saying, especially after October 7." So yes, this is really important. This is a photo that I think moved so many people, so many Israelis to see those things and to see this real kind of alliance among Muslims even. Israel's most overwhelming majority of Israelis do not have any resentment towards Muslims in general. Israel wants to have this integration. They want to have strong alliances with Muslim societies. They want to have peace and coexistence. And this is a ray of hope for Israelis. And you need to understand, right, in the last 2.5 years, it's been very hard for Israelis. And this is really something that for the national morale is very important. So this is wonderful. I just want to say a few last things that are very important because there are a lot of conspiracies and speculations, mostly coming from several Arab states, but also goes beyond into this kind of like a more anti-Israel voices in the West. And those are about what maybe Israel tried to achieve by recognizing Somaliland, and I want to disprove them, refute some of them. So by recognizing Somaliland, Israel does not intend to undermine any other major Arab country. Okay, it's not a move against Egypt. It's not a move against the Saudis. Israel sees Egypt and the Saudis as allies. As I say, if Egypt is officially a peace accord with Saudis, Israel is, I think, made clear that they want a peace accord with the Saudis. The Saudis are the ones that are kind of dragging it. But the move of Somaliland is between Israel and Somaliland. It doesn't have to do anything against other countries that are peaceful towards Israel. Another thing that by recognizing Somalia, Israel also does not rule out relations with Somalia. Okay, Somalia is not specific, not Israeli enemy. Okay, if Somalia does want to join the Abraham Accords, they are welcome. Of course, Somaliland is an independent country. Somaliland needs to have their own borders and their own sovereignty. But Israel can have relations with Somalia. It's not a move that was meant to be against Somalia per se. And lastly, is that Israel is not interested in meddling in the bigger, the broader Horn's affairs, right? Israel is not trying to now redraw the borders in Africa or in the Horn. As mentioned here, Somaliland is de jure and de facto an independent state. And Israel just recognizing the facts, right? Israel is not trying to be to break down Djibouti or Ethiopia or obviously any other country. It's just recognizing the facts and working towards shared interests. This is it. And this is really important, I think, that to stress out. So this was my short presentation. I know we're kind of short on time, and we want to leave some time for Q&A. So Shiri, you can have the stage now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Asi. Okay, I think I'll open the floor. People are raising their hands, so we'll start here with Saba. Asked you to unmute, so if you want to ask a question, now's the time. Okay, here we go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, great, thank you.
Hi, thank you for giving me the floor. Thank you for this wonderful platform and wonderful discussion about my country, Somaliland, and its history in building our country from almost nothing. I'm going to get into the question quickly because I don't want to take more time than I supposed to. My question is, why did the international community didn't oppose when Bangladesh decided to opt out of the union with Pakistan and Senegal with Gambia? Why is it different case with when Somaliland decided to leave a union that was never legally ratified or internationally approved? Why is it seen as if Somaliland
sorry to stop you, but do you have a specific question for any of the participants?
Yes.
Okay, please.
Anyone can answer my question because this question always goes in my mind. Whoever would like to volunteer
So you're basically
to answer
asking
my question
why is Somaliland's case in someone who opposes recognition is different in
it's
Professor
different
Geller,
than Pakistan and Bangladesh and Zambia, Senegal and Gambia. And why is it considered as opening Pandora box? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Professor Geller or Asi, would you like to take one of the question? Just to ask to unmute you. Yeah, just unmute Sheldon.
Well,
There we go.
I think with Senegal and Gambia, it wasn't as much a hostile. It was more of a mutual thing. In Bangladesh, it wasn't. People in Bangladesh were being repressed. And this is really the issue. Under what circumstances can a repressed group within a nation state have the right to leave? The best solution is to have some kind of more federal system or autonomy within, but the centralized state to use its power to repress other people, this is one of the consequences. It's hypocrisy. So you really have to make a judgment about the extent of the repression, the extent of the damage to the country that succeeds. In Senegal, they solved it peacefully. It wasn't because you had different interests, and they said, okay.
Okay, thank you. Ali, if you can unmute, and people, please just directly the questions so we have enough time for everybody. Please, Ali.
I'm Ali Osman from Stockholm, professor, Department of Education, Stockholm University. And my question was directed to Goth. And I really wonder why the Somali government, an intellectual like me, I'm a Somalilander, should not have difficulty in asserting Somaliland legitimacy by highlighting its stable institutions, democratic governments, and distinctive historical trajectory. And why should we? There is always this false narrative that Somaliland is dominated by a clan. There is a broad clan representation in Somaliland, but there is always this false narrative that it is dominated by the Isaki clan, which is not true. But we have really difficulties as Somalilanders to counter this argument. There's also a historical revisionism that everybody is talking about, but that case is not made in a very strong way. But I don't know what is the problem or the issues are. I've not been Somaliland for a long time, so I don't really know if there are think tanks that probably can lead this argument, both internationally and regionally. I live in Scandinavia. I'm working in Scandinavia for the last 30 years. I don't see anybody presenting the case of Somaliland here.
Okay. Ali, please, people, I appreciate the
I'm
comments,
sorry.
but if you have, please, questions, something with a question mark in the end, that would really be helpful. But thank you. Sticking in the comment.
My question is to Goth. Why don't we have that type of
To Goth.
infrastructure?
Okay, to Bashir.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Bashir, would you like to take that question? Just unmute. And maybe leave the unmute on as we are answering the questions.
Yeah, Shiri, I would like to address that. And also the question the Somalilander lady asked, my fellow Somalilander asked about Bangladesh. You know, this is again the hypocrisy we were talking about the international community. Bangladesh had a devastating war with Pakistan. It was called Eastern Pakistan. And then there was a war between Eastern Pakistan and Western Pakistan, which is now Pakistan. And the Bangladeshis won that war. And as soon as the fighting stopped, India, a very powerful country, became the first country to unilaterally recognize Bangladesh, because it was for the interest of India, security interests and strategic interest of India to support Bangladesh. And then, because India was a powerful country, nobody could say that you violated the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Pakistan. It took 1 year for other countries, like for the United States, to recognize Bangladesh, and it took almost 3 to 4 years for Muslim countries to recognize Bangladesh. So it's a matter of who recognizes you first, and then geopolitical interests and the interests of the countries that are really interested to recognize you. With Somaliland, with the Israeli recognition of Somaliland, I am sure it will be similar to that of Bangladesh. It may take a few years down the road, but countries will come on board very soon. On the other one, the narrative, the gentleman now from the Scandinavian asked about the narrative of the, one clan dominated the Republic of Somaliland. That is a false narrative actually promoted by Somalia and the international community that is Somalia. I always call the international community and embassies and everybody in Mogadishu or Somalia as a captive community. They only listen to one side of the narrative of the Somali people. Not only Somaliland, but even including the other parties of the Federal Republic of Somalia, like other federal states. So they are a captive an audience that are in Mogadishu, the United Nations, the AMISOM, the international community, and they listen to that narrative and they just propagate that narrative through the United Nations and through the African Union. Somaliland, like any other country in the world, has a majority clan and other clans. We have almost 10 clans in Somaliland. Almost 10 clans in Somaliland. Not a single clan. Yes, there is a majority everywhere, but this is a consensus. The independence, the restoration of independence of Somaliland on 18 May 1991 was a consensus, an agreement between all the clans of Somaliland that came together in Bur'o that day. So this is a false narrative that we have to fight, promoted by Mogadishu, and it's understandable how it carried the day because the international community was supporting them.
Thank you, Bashir. All right. Siham?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes,
Thank
very
you.
well.
This is a very interesting panel. I want to thank Ambassador Bashir's amazing way he told the Somaliland story, and I thank the other panelists. My question is for Ambassador Bashir Goth, but I would like to make a small comment. As a proud Somalilander, I want to, and I always do, frame the Somaliland recognition more than just a symbolic request, and really ask, when I get the chance, to acknowledge our legal continuity, which was never, after the independence from Britain, was never forfeited, and Somaliland is actually just demanding continuity of that legal status. So building on that, Ambassador Bashir Goth, in your presentation today, you stressed how costly non-recognition is for Somaliland and Somalilanders, and that, you articulated well, but, in today's context, 2026, can you give us one or two, harms or challenges Somaliland faces, whether that's, wall threats on our unresolved status or regionally, and what specific recognition-linked outcomes can you highlight from that, whether it's, mobility and, passport, visa, investments, or whether it's a formal collaboration and access to finance? Thank you.
Yeah, Shiri, I can answer that. Hello?
Yes, sure. Yeah, you can answer this. So.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, Siham, thank you very much. Yes, what the greatest challenge that Somaliland faced was lack of recognition, because that was the key for everything else. That was the key for the isolation we faced. That was the key for the financial problems we faced, because we did not have access to international financial institutions like the World Bank and International Monetary Fund and the African Development Bank, among other things for our development. Like I mentioned earlier, we could not even get a vaccine during the COVID. Yes, we face also travel problems because our people, because we are not recognized yet, we cannot travel with our passport. Only we can travel to a very limited countries. I can remember Siham was one of the students who got a scholarship to the United States, and I remember the challenge that she and her colleagues faced when they were coming to the United States because of the lack of recognition of Somaliland. But today we have broken that great barrier. which is recognition. And with that, everything else will be actually easy because investment will come. More partners of Somaliland will be encouraged. We are a country that value partnership. I just remembering what Dr. Greg said earlier. If I was writing today the book that was called "How Europe Underdeveloped Africa," by Walter Rodney, if I was writing today, I would have said how aid underdeveloped Africa. And Somaliland is a country that did not rely on aid. Actually, there was a book written about Somaliland that's called When There Was No Aid. So partnership will come. Companies will be encouraged. You cannot imagine how many companies and institutions now contact me after the recognition of Israel here and want to go and explore Somaliland. So it will be a little more patience. We have been patient for over 35 years. A little more patience, and we will reach where we want to reach.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I want to take one question from the Q&A. We have a question by David Firester, and it's also addressed to you. And the question is very interesting, I think. It's asked, what are Somaliland's main needs in order of priority at this point, and obviously things that maybe Israel can provide to Somaliland. So we would love to hear your opinion on that.
Some topics that have already been discussed between Somaliland and Israel have been, areas that really Israel excels in expertise and skills, like agriculture, water, health. All these areas would be very, very important, particularly water and agriculture. And technology also. So these are three areas that will be very important for the development of Somaliland. And on top of that, and the key will be security cooperation between the two countries. Because as you said, Doctor, and as I know, Israel and Somaliland have common adversaries and common interests in the region.
Definitely. Thank you very much. Let's take a question now from Ahmed Farah. Can you ask your question, please, sir? You're muted, I believe. You're muted, Mr. Ahmed. We can hear you still, Mr. Ahmed. Here you go. No, we can't hear you, sir. So let's try one more second. If not, can't hear you. I at least cannot hear Ahmed, but let's take somebody else in the meantime. Maybe we'll come back to you if it. I have somebody, Cornelius. Would you like to ask a question, Cornelius?
Yes.
Okay, Mohammed.
Hello. I think I'm unmuted.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yeah, thank you. I want to first thank the Israeli African Relation Institute and our ambassador to the US, Dr. Bashir God. Thank you for this wonderful discussion. My name is Dr. Mohammed Bobe. I live in Hargeisa. My question is, what does, if Somaliland joins the Abraham Accords, what does that entail? Will it mean that all Abraham Accord members will recognize Somaliland, or they will have to choose for themselves later?
I would like to answer that. So right now, Netanyahu, the prime minister, has called on basically on the U.S. to join. Only when the U.S. joins, it's really the Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords, it's a trilateral framework where the U.S., Israel, and a third country that it doesn't have diplomatic relationship, usually Muslim, they have diplomatic relations. So in order to have the Abraham Accords here, you will have the U.S. to recognize Somaliland and then announce it as part of this Abraham Accord framework. We are not there yet, and I don't think it says automatically that you will have relations with all of the countries. But you should mention that as other speakers have mentioned, Somaliland and the UAE have really good relations. And Israel is hopeful that more countries join, including the UAE. Okay, so I think we'll take questions from the Q&A that people have been asking on the board. Um, um, Oh, Ahmed, I see you wrote here how to ensure strong security to counteract threat from neighboring and anti-Israel diplomacy, such as Egypt and Turkey against Somaliland. It's quite a difficult question. Asi, would you like to? I can't hear you.
Now, can you hear me, Shiri?
Yeah,
Not
we can
okay.
hear you
Okay,
now.
great. Okay, perfect. Yeah, I will just say that the question bundles Egypt and Turkey together. So we think that Egypt is Israel and Egypt are not in a state of war or any hostility officially, and we also don't think that Egypt is gonna do really anything against Somaliland. Egypt is a pretty balanced and responsible regional actor. Okay, so I don't think Egypt is such a threat for Somaliland, although they obviously are not thrilled at all by the Somaliland's independence. On the other hand, Turkey is a bit different. It could be in the future a threat. Israel and Turkey do not have such an amazing relationship, to say the least, right now. It's not an enemy in Israel's eyes, but it is a rival. And we saw that the Turkish moved some fighter jets into Mogadishu. We do not believe that they are going to act themselves against Somaliland, because honestly, I do believe that in a military clash between Somaliland and Turkey, I'm not sure Turkey is going to win at all, and I'm not sure they're willing to take this risk. Turkey has not really fought so many wars besides against the Kurds, which is not really fair. They've not done really exercise their military too much, so I would not worry too much. There are other threats like the Houthis. They are threatening, and they showed us that they're willing to do stuff. I believe, I cannot speak on behalf of the Israeli government, but I believe that Israel is going to be more than willing to help as much as possible to secure Somaliland's security as much as possible, especially against the Houthis. And we do believe that the Turkish are not really closer to actually making any moves. It's a lot of showing force and muscles, but it's not yet a threat. Yeah.
But I have to disclaim, okay, we are not representing the government, and this is our own opinions. Yes, Ahmed, I see you're back. Please.
Thank you. My question is the way forward from here. What the institute can really educate people in areas of diplomacy. You can see Turkey Prime Minister has already acknowledged in 2012 he used the recognition of Somaliland as a bait for getting recognition for Cyprus. And you can see his intention is not to against Somaliland, but he is trying to get a recognition for Cyprus, but acting for Somalis that he is helping. So diplomacy propaganda. How can the institute really build Somaliland communication system into countermeasuring those things? The second
So,
question.
yes.
The second question is the security. Threats are coming as my the last speaker have
Yeah.
explained. Maybe threat is not there imminent in Egypt and in Turkey, but it might be a threat from Saudi Arabia helping Somalia. And what are these when Israel and United States are working Abraham Accord to bring in Saudi Arabia, but Saudi Arabia is doing on the contrary to the principles of Abraham Accord. How are
But
we?
that's at least I think 3 or 4 questions. Okay, so we'll take those and we'll let
One more thing
others.
is the economy.
Okay.
Somaliland is in a hub. So can we really think of designing something that could be the Singapore of Horn of Africa, that Israel's economic might and the security might can make it that Berbera and the Red Sea corridor, the gateway for Africa and the Middle East and the rest of the world. Thank you.
Inshallah. Okay, let me break it down to a few questions, and I will happy to ask, and then my colleagues can add. I want to say first a general question as someone that was involved in the Abraham Accords and worked in the legal departments of the National Security Council. We are we see how fast things are want to move, but bureaucracies in government, they don't work as fast as our desire in this webinar or in other places to do. There's actually a lot of things that government to government needs to happen to be in place. Diplomatic relations need to be signed. Your president needs to come here. We exchange embassies. And I think Israel's vast experience in international law can really be leveraged for Somaliland to base all of its claims and for us to get to know you, and we can put it in writing. Everything that has to do with regulation, financial regulation, telecommunication, airspace. There's so many things that we need to do to connect the government. This is not an easy precedent, what is going on here. But I think with a lot of goodwill from the Israeli government, and we are, I can say, are pushing and will gladly assist both governments in all of these endeavors to do this as fast as possible. But we all also need to be a little bit more patient and understand this will take some time, but I think the potential, as I get to know Somaliland more and more, is huge, and I think it's very well. Now, what's going on with Saudi Arabia and Turkey? This is a recent development that we're seeing. I personally believe it has to do more with the relations between the UAE and Saudi Arabia and things that happened in Yemen with the South Yemen. The Declaration of Independence and separatists, and so I think we should tackle each of the issues at a time and be a little bit more patient. Dr. Mills, I see. I think you wanna also say a few remarks on this topic.
Yeah, let me do so because unfortunately I have to leave shortly after this point. But I mean, I think there's several things about diplomacy. One of them is standing out, and the other one is reaching out. And the first question, I think, is largely answered by how Somaliland positions itself and what it wants to position itself as. Is this the success story of the Horn of Africa? Is this the country that emerged after a bitter 30-year history of 30 years of diplomatic relative wilderness, and now it's into the next 30-year phase of growth and compounded global interest? What's that narrative that Somaliland wants? Personally, I think the strongest feature of Somaliland is this organic sense of governance, that it's done this in spite of, perhaps even because of, the absence of international recognition. And there's a question in and of itself. So this ability to self-generate success is one. The other very important dimension in an era where democracy is, not really something that seemingly too many countries are concerned about, except for those of us who live in Africa, of course, is it's a democratic success story with problems and wrinkles and difficulties and postponed elections. But it just shows that even in very poor places, you can successfully hold elections. And to use the Kofi Annan phraseology, that democracy is a fantastic pressure release valve for societies which are otherwise under stress. And so I think the great selling point is for Somaliland is about it's done it its way, firstly, in spite of the international community, and secondly, it's done it the democratic way. And that's a threat, it has to be said, for many African countries the vast majority of Africans, 93%, live under various forms of authoritarianism. So Somaliland is a standout in this regard. It actually identifies with the two-thirds, 70% of Africans polled who routinely prefer democracy to any other form of government. So in fact, there answers my second point, which is you stand out in one way, but you reach out in another. And it's not just about the state-to-state stuff. It's not just about the Abraham Accords. I grant you that's also very important. But it's also about reaching out to civil society groupings. It's also about economic diplomacy. It's about business diplomacy. It's about subnational diplomacy. I mean, this is a tremendous challenge to the African Union. I don't, by the way, apropos one of the first questions, think that this is just solely a Senegalese kind of question or a Bangladeshi question. I think Eritrea is a much better analogy of a country that pre-existed and then decided to re-exist, as it were, as an independent entity. And that was accepted because you had a mutual acceptance of a divorce. It wasn't that the problem with Somaliland is that one party wants to divorce and the other party wants to remain married for the same reasons that they wanted to get married back in 1960, it would appear. So the answer to how you reach out in Somaliland's case is state to state now. It's subnational. It's what's the engagement strategy at the African Union? What's the engagement strategy with civil society groupings? What's the engagement strategy with business? And then what's the content of each of those different discussions around security, around business opportunities, around what's in it for them? So just to go back and to emphasize my point, you need to stand out, but you also need to reach out.
Thank you, Dr. Mills, for participating. I know you have to go, but it was really important to have you. So thank you so much. Yes, Eastgate Ventures. Yes, please.
Hi. Thank you very much. I believe you touched into the question that I was planning to have. It was primarily related to whether you anticipate representative offices being opened within the year in Tel Aviv and Hargeisa. I understand Taiwan is not a direct example, partly because Taiwan is also an unrecognized territory, but they also did open representative offices within the year. So since my company, my partners and I, we are based in the UK and China. However, we have some equity in a couple businesses and operate a business in Somaliland and have been doing so for about a year. So we just want to see the implications of it and whether a scouting trip to Tel Aviv is also worth it.
Yes, I think the embassies will be open within a year. It's very, very likely. And as I said, as this relationship grows, Israel's private sector is very strong and is always looking, we're a very entrepreneurial society. And there's already have been a lot of interest in both sides to engage. But there will be kind of this legal infrastructure that we'll need to put in place. And I'm sure there's people that are working on it right now. And I think it will take some time, but I think within a year, it's definitely something is realistic.
Okay, that's good then. You're likely to see me in Tel Aviv then. That's good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. All right, please, next question. Al Khair.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for hosting panels like this, and I truly appreciate the effort you all put into this and organizing these discussions. I hope you continue and similar panels like this in the future. But I would like to ask a question to Bashir Goth. As we know, Bashir, legality is the foundation of international recognition, and Somaliland possesses substantial legal evidence and documentation supporting its case for re-recognition and its right to seat at the United Nations. My question is for you, Bashir Goth, is Was the 1960 union between Somaliland and Somalia legally valid and binding under international law? And also, does the restoration of Somaliland's independence and sovereignty violate international legal principles? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bakhair. Let me answer that quickly. The 1960 union of between Somaliland and Somalia. By the way, the word Somalia is a popular name that never existed in a legal document. It was Somali Republic when the two sides merged, and that was never ratified. And it's legally documented that was never ratified by the Somali Republic, the union that was created. And a good example that you can find that, and I mentioned that several times before, is one in late 1960, the Somaliland military officers wanted to restore Somaliland sovereignty and independence at that time, like we did now, and they failed. And they were court-martialed and put on military trial in Mogadishu. The British lawyer that was hired to defend them, they were accused of national treason because they were against the union of the country. Okay, they were kind of dismantling the union, so that was a national treason. He actually proved that they did not commit national treason because there was no union. Legally, there was no binding union. And the government that time accepted the rule. And that's a proof that there was no legal union between the two sides. And there was no legal union, and that was never ratified, to restore our independence and sovereignty again, it's just natural. We have a very, very strong legal argument, but I want to emphasize another thing. In today's world, yes, in an ideal world, interests follow the law. But in today's world, it's actually the interests that precede the law. So if you look at the world today, it's the interest that leads everything. So the national interest of any country actually comes before the law. So Somaliland recognition is diplomatic, and it will be based on diplomatic interest and international interest. So diplomacy is a political issue, then a legal issue, actually, as happening in many other parts of the world. Yes, there were legal divorce in some countries like Eritrea and Ethiopia. In Bangladesh and Pakistan, there was never legal divorce because Bangladesh was never a separate entity anyway. But then one country recognized it, and then it was that was the end of the story. 3 years down the road, they were a member of the United Nations. So yes, we have a very strong legal argument, and that union was never legalized.
Thank you, Bashir. Abdishuka? Shaku? Yes. Please, can you unmute? Okay, here we go.
Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you for the opportunity and for the panel discussion. My question will be to Dr. Asher. From your perspective, it has been now a month since Israel decision to recognize Somaliland. And during this time, we have seen a strong and organized opposition from Israel's adversaries, including active efforts from Qatar to block or undermine this decision. At the same time, Israel allies have largely remained silent. From your view, shouldn't Israel allies not only support Israel's decision, but also recognize that those allies of Israel should naturally be allies of Somaliland as well? And as you started on your conversation earlier, or your perspective, you said more of the enemies of Somaliland are the enemies of Israel. Shouldn't this be the same? The allies of Israel shouldn't be the allies of Somaliland.
Yes, okay, thank you for the question. This is a good question, but we need to remember that there are many kinds of alliances, right? Alliances can look many different ways, right? And for example, the UAE does not recognize Somaliland yet, but it's definitely an ally, a very important ally. They are invested in Somaliland much more than Israel is, for example, right? So you see that most of Israel's close allies are also pretty friendly to Somaliland. That includes, of course, the United States, the Emirates, some Western governments in West Europe, and Taiwan is pretty close with Israel too. So you do see that it's largely aligns together. The question is formal recognition. Formal recognition, well, Israel said what it had to say, right? Israel said that it has the reason to recognize Somaliland. It is a sovereign decision to recognize Somaliland, but it to some extent Israel cannot impose other countries to recognize as well. We can, in a way, maybe lobby them or like try to convince them, but there is a limit to how much we can impose. I think each of these countries you mentioned and the allies of Israel have their own motivations and their own considerations that might be a bit different than Israel's, more specific, and they take their time. It would help if another country would recognize too for this. That's my own kind of speculation feeling. I would put my money on the United States of America. Okay, this is, I think, a country that is strong enough, confident enough, and bold enough to actually make such a decision. Many other countries that we mentioned have many other kind of restrictions, like the UAE has a restriction because of the Arab League, right, and the Arab world. Ethiopia has a restriction because of its ties with China and other reasons. I think the United States, it's where it's at, but I don't know if it will happen, right? But I think that the best chance is to go there, and this is we have here the person who is in charge of making it happen, His Excellency. So we hope to hear good news from the United States. Once the United States is in, I think that will be when many other countries will also follow suit. All right, Shiri, do you want to we take another question?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Asher. And let's please, next questions, let's do it very brief. Brief questions, brief answers. Please have a question mark in the end. Thank you. Please go ahead. This 1240, there's a serial number there that I don't have the name. So just ask you to unmute. Please. No.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, here we go. Yes.
Hello?
Yes. Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes. What's your name?
Okay, my name is Anis Isa. I'm director of Somaliland Advocacy Group based in Washington, D.C. Also, I was the first Somaliland representative in Washington, D.C. Hi, everybody.
Hi, welcome.
I'm just trying to make a little comment, not a question, for the strategic drivers behind Somaliland. And I may say like 2 or 3 comments like security and stability. To say Somaliland has been far more stable than what we call Somalia for the last decades. A strong local conflict resolution system is plain inclined and instruction with formal institution. Recognition will allow direct security, partnership, armed recruitment, and intelligence sharing. And second, if I say strategic geography, Somaliland sits along the Gulf of Aden, one of the world's busiest maritime checkpoints, close to Bab el-Mandeb Strait, Red Sea shipping lines, and the Middle East. This makes Somaliland strategically attractive for military basing, counter-piracy operation, trade, and logistics. Okay, Prepare Port is the centerpiece of here. So I would say like regional power competition. The Horn of Africa is a geopolitical hotspot. Gulf states, Turkey, China, Western power.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you very well, and this is being recorded, and so it's just I can't. It doesn't sound coherent enough. So if it's Okay, we'll move on to the next person. Maybe you can have a better line, better
All right.
connection.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, next question, please. And Ambassador Goth has to, I think, go on another call. So, Ambassador, I mean, it's up to you if you need to go. We'll thank you at this point.
Yeah, I can stay with you another 5 minutes if there's
Okay.
a question for
All
me.
right. Okay. All right. So please just if you have questions for Bashir, go ahead, please. It says IL, so I don't know who to refer to. Hello, Omar, go ahead.
Hello,
Yes.
first of all, thank you so much. I'm very delighted to see here Bashir God and the other members, the way they have stated and talking about the case of Somaliland and Israel. It was amazing. We have learned a lot from here. I've really just it's just a very simple question, which is about, how to strengthen relationships between Somalilanders and Israelis in the diaspora, because we have more communities in Europe, in America, in Africa, in Asia. And, when Israelis and Somalilanders united in abroad, it seems like they have a strong voice. And my question is how to strong that relationship between both countries. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bashir, do you want to address that question?
Yeah, thank you very much, Omar. Yeah, and that's a very, very great question. Yes, we have to have people-to-people relationship all the time. Many Israelis will be coming to Somaliland, as you have seen even recently, and many more will be coming, like think tanks and business people, and probably cultural people also. And here, for example, in Europe and the United States, let me talk about the United States. We have already started reaching out. And soon you will see some activities and events, organized between, the Jewish and Somaliland American communities here in the United States. And wherever you are, please reach out to the Israeli communities wherever you are. That's really good.
I think that's a great idea. Habtum, please. You can unmute.
How do I
Yes.
mute? Okay, did
Yes.
I mute it?
We hear you.
Okay, thank you very. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much for you, Shiri, and for organizing all this event. It's amazing, and it's really, really amazing that Israel took this initiative and recognized Somaliland. For people who do not know, it's amazing. It's very huge decision. I want to ask you, to the ambassador. First of all, I want to express that you have many people in Africa, including Eritrea, the Tigrinian nation, supports your self-determination. You're not alone in that region. So that I think is very important for you guys to know. But I wanted to ask you a question. Do you do what, I mean, in today's media, social media is very important. And do you guys outreach to people in the region that also supports your self-determination, your independence, which is not any less than any African country that is recognized as independent, because according to international law, you are more than any, the same as any other African countries that you have to be recognized. So do you outreach to many of these people living in Sudan, in Eritrea, in Ethiopia, who seek for self-determination and who support self-determination? Do you outreach them? This is one question. The second question to Asher, I'm very happy that you guys are doing a lot of lobby for Israel to do more. And today we see that yesterday I think Turkish and Saudi just had a joint declaration. I mean, what do you expect? What do you expect from Israel in the short term or in the long term to do to help Somaliland? Because it's very important for the region that Israel really comes and be involved in that region. It's a lot of many people make a lot of hope for Israel coming there because it helps the stability of the region, the Red Sea. So what do you expect? Thank you very much. This is it. But thank you very much for organizing this event. It's amazing.
Thank you, Abdul. Bashir?
Let me thank the gentleman first for the support of the people, Eritrean people who support Somaliland. We are very thankful to them. We supported the Eritrean people for a long time during their struggle, and I think we owe them that. So thank you very much for that. Yes, we reach out to Africa, and you know, like Dr. Greg said, diplomacy has many faces. So we do all the time. Business reach out, cultural reach out, people to people reach out, and official reach out. All of them at the same time we do. All neighboring countries, we have very good and meaningful relations with them. Some African countries have diplomatic representatives in Somaliland, in Hargeisa. So we do our part, and the rest of the part actually depends on the African governments. It's not always about international law. International law is actually, like I said, applied selectively. So we will continue the march. Thank you.
See?
Hello, can I?
Go ahead, Asi.
Excuse me, can you
Oh,
hear me?
one second. Just let Asi answer.
So I'll be very quick. Haptum, thank you very much, my friend, for this question. I think Israel has a lot to concentrate now on bilateral things with Somaliland, like progress and advancing a lot of what Shiri also mentioned, a lot of agreements and bureaucracies and procedures, and this I think what Israel will focus on mostly. It will help if needed, maybe, you know, in the regional sense, but Israel is mostly right now interested in the direct alliance with Somaliland. Regionally, you know, Israel made the stance already that it's a sovereign decision. It's our right to recognize whoever we want to recognize. And this is it, you know, if the Turkish or the Saudis are upset about this, you know what, you know, okay, but we have a lot of issues they're upset about, so we can discuss it later if they want to.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we had some Israeli question. I asked to unmute, please. Here we go. I just don't have the name, so.
Yes, my name is Idan, and thank you very much for all of this event. I have very short and very practical questions. First of all, I must say I'm very proud that my country was the first one to recognize. And ever since, I've been hearing a lot of Somalilanders, and they are very impressive, and I'm really excited about this. I am a businessman. I deal in West Africa, and I'm really interested in arriving in Somaliland and exploring all of the business opportunities. But there is a lot of unclarity. What is the best way for an Israeli to arrive to Somaliland with an Israeli passport? Some people are saying there are some problems with doing this, and I'm not sure what is the right answer. This is one question. The second question, is there a forum? I know it's very early days, but is there some forum where Israeli and Somalilander businessmen can interact? And if there isn't one, I would suggest that we set it up and we have a starting point for Israelis and Somalilanders to interact and do business together and get some answers, because I still am finding it difficult to get very clear answers. Thank you.
So, Bashir, before you take it, okay, I just want to say we are, like I said before, everybody's very much in a hurry, but we didn't formally establish the relations. So we don't have visas, procedures in place yet. So I would urge everybody to be a little bit more patient. There have been online platforms. We ourselves are planning all kinds of events. But again, we have to let the procedures also take their form and the bureaucracy to pan out. But Bashir, if you have anything official, because I'm not here to represent the Israeli government, but Bashir, please.
Yeah, you answer it for me, Shiri, and it's the same answer actually. But about the visa, for example, there's no problem. You know, visas in Somaliland is on arrival, particularly for the Israeli people. And if there are some other issues or some challenges we face now, that can be resolved, and Eden can contact Somaliland Foreign Ministry for more explanation.
And I think soon we will have an ambassador, and then we have a point of contact to refer Israelis are wanted. Ahmed, please. The next question is, we'll take like another 1-2 questions, and then we'll have to wrap it up. Please, Ahmed.
Yeah, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Ahmed Diriye. I was the former Minister of Planning in Somaliland and former Minister of Education. And currently, I run a research consultancy firm. And we are working now for public perception survey about this relationship in here in Hargeisa to show the international community that what Mogadishu is saying is different than the reality on the ground. So my question is, first time I would like to thank all of you and also to organize this meeting, and also Israel government people to recognize Somaliland, and hopefully we will continue from there. But I have one question, which is I feel an imminent threat from Somaliland security from the western border with Djibouti, where we learned that the Djibouti official army troops are infiltrated to the border while they are pretending to like a local militia, and they are working with Mogadishu government and also with Egypt. And the main objective that they are working to pave the way for African peacekeeping force to deploy eastern and western regions of Somaliland, which is a very dangerous, imminent threat. So I am not sure if the ambassador left, but if there is anything that they are, the two governments of Israel and Somaliland, they are working for minimizing this threat. And by the way, I believe also Ethiopia, maybe it's indirectly, but because those groups are declaring war against Somaliland while they are in Ethiopia, and also the group that fights Eastern Somaliland, they declare war while they are in Ethiopia. So I feel Ethiopia is using this as a pressure, military pressure, Somaliland to gain, that Somaliland will sign MOU agreement. So this is what I feel. This is
Yes.
the last one is
Ahmed,
my perception.
clear. We're really out of time. Bashir, if you want to take a sentence or two to comment, and I think we'll have to wrap it up. I'm sorry, everybody, but it's already been 2 hours, so please.
Yeah, and Shiri, I thank Ahmed, and I know the minister. I don't have any imminent threat or security threat that Somaliland is facing. I don't have that, and I don't have that information. There's a lot of rumors and misinformation going on, on the social media, and there is a lot of false narrative and misinformation coming from our adversaries in Mogadishu that they spread everywhere. Countries sometimes, face a little domestic issues, and that could be, but there is no foreign imminent threat on Somaliland or anywhere in our borders. The country is safe and stable, and every week the cabinet, in the cabinet meeting, there is a security report, and the latest security report, which was a few days ago, everything was good. So I would just leave it with that.
Thank you, and thank everybody for their participation. I just want again to note that our next webinar is on February 26th, and we'll deal with Ethiopia's economic reform. Thank you, everybody, for being here, for participating. This will be available on our YouTube channel, right? Hopefully by tomorrow midday. And of course, if needed, I will be happy to make connections to our speakers and panelists. And stay tuned, and please follow us and join our newsletter. Bashir, thank you. Professor Sheldon, thank you. Other two speakers had to leave. So again, congratulations to Somaliland and to Israel for this forming of relationship, and we hope to be in touch.
Thank you very much, Shiri. Thank you for your great effort, and I look forward to seeing you in Somaliland very soon.
Inshallah.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Take care. Bye. Bye.